Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett. Thanks for being with us on this Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, depending on where you are. Always great to be with you. We're always grateful that you're here with us. Thanks for taking the time with us. Got an open forum for you. First hour, Jimmy Akin came in, so that's a little bonus. We got a Friday open forum for you, and then we got one of those fun Friday things we like to do, weird questions with Jimmy Akin, second hour. Every single question will be weird. I cannot vouch for the answers. That is entirely up to Jimmy, but all the questions will be weird in the second hour today. First hour, if you want to call with your question, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Cy Kellett.
Happy Friday to you.
Likewise.
And that means today dropped the second half of the spooky psychic spying episodes of the two-episode thing on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
If you want to put it that way, sure.
It's not spooky? Is it which modifier would?
Well, it isn't. It did involve intelligence work, so It was spooky in that sense. You know, spooks, spies.
Oh, I see. Yes, right.
Yeah. So this was part 2 of an interview I did with Paul Smith, who was one of the original Stargate remote viewers for the government's psychic spying program in the military. And in this episode, we get into not only some really interesting things that happened during the course of the Stargate program, not the TV show, obviously, but also we evaluate remote viewing from the perspectives of faith and reason. And because Paul Smith is a man of faith, obviously so am I, and so we talk about it, you know, and we ask the D question. Could it be demons? So we talk about all that stuff. I also shed light, coming from a Catholic perspective, on what Catholic theologians like St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas have said about psychic powers, and they did not dismiss them
out of hand.
Also, I've seen already online in people from the remote viewing community have been very interested in the interview, and in fact, one of the other Stargate psychic spies gave me a like on Facebook for this.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So when you say remote viewing community, is this a community that gets together, or do they just wherever they are, they're already together?
They do get together. I mean, they have like Zoom chats and things like that.
Yeah.
And I've hung out on some of those and see how they interact. And, you know, one thing that's interesting is how sincere they are. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, there are, in any business, there are people who are just scamming.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And
even in our business, in the religion business, there's plenty of scammers.
And it's true also, obviously, in the psychic community. There are psychics who are just scammers. Yeah. But these people, like, meet on a given afternoon of the week for like 2 or 3 hours every week by Zoom. Oh, yeah. And in hanging out and watching their discussions, they are not getting together and saying, how can we scam people out of more money?
No, they won't.
How can we pull the wool over their eyes? For hours, they are getting together and saying, how can I improve? How can I be more accurate? What techniques do I need to use?
Wow.
And so they're very sincere about that.
That's fascinating. So you work on it like you might work on any other skill.
Yes, exactly.
I see. 888-318-7884, our number. Jimmy Akin, our guest. An open forum means you can call with any question you've got. Already, lines have have lit up a light. Thank you. I don't know why I was stuck on that.
Oh, and you've got the nice English up intensifier there, which signals the closing of a process.
Oh, really? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it tends to like he ate up the food.
Oh,
it's
and
finished.
It's finished. Yeah.
Or to quote Mark Twain, the widow fatted up.
Well, she might not be finished. She might have some more fattening up to do. Jordan in Hogville, Connecticut, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. You are next. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Jordan. So my question. So I'm a new Catholic. So I just started going to the Catholic Church from. I used to be a Protestant. Mm-hmm. So I've been reading on the Incarnation by Saint Athanasius, and one of the statements that really is profound and is kind of blowing my mind is the statement, "God became man that man might become God." So I was just wondering if you could help explain that for me, because it still seems so incredible and so interesting.
Yeah. So this refers to a process that is, it's an aspect of God's grace. It's referred to in the New Testament. It's sometimes called theosis, from the Greek word theos, which means God. It's also sometimes called divinization, which is based on Latin roots. So it's the process by which God uses his grace to enable us to share in certain aspects, certain characteristics that he has, certain aspects of his nature. Theologians distinguish between what are called so God has a variety of attributes, like, for example, he's omnipotent, he can do anything. He's omniscient, he knows everything. He's eternal and uncreated. He's also good and kind and merciful and glorious and things like that. And theologians will distinguish between different types of attributes. Some they call incommunicable attributes, because God cannot communicate these to us. He can't give them to us. So, for example, he's uncreated and outside of time. Well, he can't make us uncreated. We're created beings. We always will be created beings. Also, we're always inside of time in one way or another. But there are other attributes where God can share them with us so that we can become godly. We can come to share in God's love and compassion. We can become loving, compassionate people. We can share in his holiness. We can become moral people who do moral good and act in a holy way. We also can share in God's glory. You know, St. Paul talks about how we're going to be glorified with God. And there are even senses in which we can come to share in a measure of God's power and knowledge. So so he does all this by his grace. St. Peter refers to this in his letters. He talks about how by God's grace we become partakers of the divine nature. And really that's just another way of saying God is making us godly people. He's allowing us to share in certain of his characteristics. Now, we never become fully God. We never become infinite. We never become uncreated. Those are incommunicable things. But we do come to have a share in certain other divine attributes by God's grace. And that's what St. Athanasius and others are talking about. Now, I should mention there is a mistranslation that sometimes happens of this famous statement by St. Athanasius. In fact, the mistranslation actually, unfortunately, got into the English edition of the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Latin edition is just fine, but the English version has a mistranslation on this point, and Tim Staples actually wrote an article about that a few years ago. So you might want to check that article out, Jordan, just for a little extra perspective on this. If you Google Tim Staples, Catechism, Athanasius, Might Become God, it should come right up for you.
Okay, Jordan?
Awesome. Thank you so much. That really helps clarify it.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Appreciate it. Our number here is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin is our guest. 2 lines open right now, and so you can get in the queue if you like to ask your question, and you don't have to be Catholic to call. Anybody can call. We have come up to our first break. However, before I send you off to that first break, Catholic Answers Shop has digital videos available now, and they're on sale. And many people might not know this. You probably remember maybe you've at some point gotten a DVD from Catholic Answers. Well, many of those DVDs are now available in downloadable video formats, and you can do that at shop.catholic.com. Look for the new digital video category at shop.catholic.com.
Call and ask Jimmy your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Unplanned, the true story of Abby Johnson.
I would be the youngest director in Planned Parenthood history.
She believed in a woman's right to choose.
I've had an abortion myself, so I don't have any problem with another woman making the same decision.
Until the day she saw something that changed everything.
Tiny, perfect little baby. And then it was just gone.
Now she's pulling back the curtain on the abortion industry. Unplanned.
Available at EWTNRC.com and the EWTN app.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. What a great Friday show we have for you. Jimmy Akin is our guest both hours, but we're going to do something different each hour. This hour, it's open forum, which is a bonus. We've got an open forum with Jimmy on a Friday, and you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Second hour is Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. For some reason, Jimmy has the reputation of being amenable to and able to answer weird questions. And so we get a lot of weird questions for Jimmy Akin, so we take some time to work through them, and I can assure you there are some weird ones today. All right, now let's go to Tucson, Arizona, watching on YouTube Live. Carlos in Tucson. Thank you so much, Carlos, for your call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, I just got done with your apologetics course. It was very helpful.
Awesome.
And I'm taking on the apologetics approach. However, my question is, you tend to stumble upon very dark and disturbing stuff when researching other religions or practices. What are the limits for apologetics to, what you can explore, research, learn to be able to, help explain things to common people?
Well, I don't think there are any limits in principle. Obviously there are limits to human knowledge, but within things that are going on in other religious communities, I don't think there's anything in principle that is off limits for an apologist, because there are people in these other religions, and there are dark and disturbing things in some of them, and those people in particular, the ones who are into the dark, disturbing stuff, really need God's grace. And it can help to have apologists who are able to articulate the problems with these things and also articulate the positive alternatives to them that are in Christianity. And so I would say that it's really the people who are into the darkest stuff that need the help the most. And so apologists, to the extent that they're able, should try to help them. Now, every apologist has his own predilections, his own skill set, his own inclinations, his own limitations, and you want to know those. You don't want to push yourself unnecessarily beyond where you're personally comfortable, and so forth. For example, I'm not a big fan of Satanism. Just by not only am I opposed to it, but also I just don't like reading about it. And so I have not read the Satanic Bible. I have not studied Satanism closely. I know some about it, but I'm comfortable with having a certain level of knowledge, but I don't really want to do a deep dive into Satanism. That's just a personal limitation of mine. But I trust that God, and there aren't many Satanists, fortunately, but I trust that God will give other apologists inclinations and aptitudes that are different than mine, and he'll arrange one way or another for people who are into Satanism to get the help they need.
Okay, Carlos?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Carlos. Just so you know, because I'm going to do the ad a little later, the courses are on sale right now over at the School of Apologetics. So if you want to take some more, check it out at School of Apologetics. Thanks again, Carlos. I'm going to go to Oregon now. Calvin in Oregon, watching on YouTube Live. You are next, Calvin. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
This is a moral question that's been bugging me for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say a child is being kidnapped, he's being held next door to a house, and I know about it. It would be a sin for me not to do something, at least call the police, say, hey, the kid's here and all this.
Mm-hmm.
God is without sin, so why wouldn't God let us know where that child is instead of letting that child be kept, let's say he's being kept kidnapped there for years and years and years and years and years, and nobody gets anything tortured all this time, and we don't get to, and God doesn't tell us where that child is.
Okay. So this is a version of what's known as the problem of evil. And the problem of evil is something that theologians and philosophers have thought about for millennia, actually, for thousands of years. And Christian theologians in particular have been thinking about it for the last 2,000 years. And there is this, question that at times people really can struggle with. Why would a good God allow evil things to go on if he could stop them? And there have been various answers that have been proposed. Some of them are more helpful than others. Some of them just don't work. And it would be wrong to say we have a complete answer to this question. We don't, because God's knowledge goes beyond ours. But there are some things that can be said that I think are helpful here. One of them is precisely because God has, so the basic answer is because God would not allow an evil to occur if he didn't have a way to bring an equal or greater good out of it. So God would stop any evil from happening unless he was going to bring about a greater good. That's what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says. Now, we can't always see what that greater good is. And in that respect, it's a little bit like when you're a kid and you're maybe, say, 1, 2, 3 years old, and your parents are taking you to the doctor for your childhood injections. Well, from the perspective of a child, this is evil. This is just, meaning it involves physical pain and fear, which are physical evils. Your parents, who take care of you normally, suddenly seem to betray you, and they take you to this scary place, and strangers are holding you down, and they're inserting a sharp object into your body, and it stings, and you're crying and afraid, and you don't know why your parents are doing this. Why are they letting this happen? They're right there. They brought you here. Well, what the child doesn't understand is actually, even though this experience does involve physical evils like fear and pain, it's actually going to be of help to the child. It's going to prevent the child from getting horrible diseases that would cause vastly more suffering and maybe even death in the future. You know, there are a lot of childhood diseases that used to kill lots of kids, but vaccinations prevent that. And so what we as adults can recognize is that we can learn something from that experience. We know that even though it wasn't obvious to the child at the time, that there was a good reason for the parents and the doctors to do that to the child, for the parents to allow that and for the doctor to do it. And we can trust God, our Father in heaven, He's our parent too in an even greater way. We can trust that He has reasons for allowing us to experience pain and fear and suffering, even though we may not know what the reason is right now. We're sort of in the position of the small child who doesn't have the full picture, whereas God does have the full picture. And presumably in the next life, and this is something the Catechism also says, we'll have more information. God will let us know the reasons why He allowed these things, so we won't be forever without understanding. Also, God Himself, for anyone who suffers innocently, God Himself will make it up to that person. St. Paul in his letters acknowledges that there is suffering in this life, but he says that the current suffering we have is weak and momentary, and it's not worth comparing to the great glory that God has in store for us. And so as a result, St. Paul teaches us that despite the sufferings we encounter in this life, God will more than make them up to us. And so those things, even though they don't answer every question we would have about why God allows particular evils, they at least sketch a framework that helps us understand why a good God would allow these evils. He's ultimately going to bring good out of them, and he will make sure that people who have suffered innocently will be more than compensated. I have actually given a talk on this subject, Calvin. It's creatively titled The Problem of Evil. And if you hang on the line, let's see if we can send Calvin a DVD of it.
All right. Calvin, please do hang on the line. If you'd like, give your address to Marie, and we'll send you out a DVD of Jimmy's talk, The Problem of Evil. Our number here is 888-318-7884. Anyone welcome to call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. You are welcome to call with your question for Jimmy Akin. And now we are going to Memphis, Tennessee. Samia in Memphis, Tennessee, also watching on YouTube Live. Big YouTube day today. Samia, you there with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hello. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yes. I came across a movie on Netflix. It's a Spanish-speaking movie about the apparitions in Garabandal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first time I hear about it, so I was
Okay, Samia, you're fading in and out. Can you put your mouth right next to the phone?
Do you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah. That's better.
Good. So I was just saying that I had never heard about the apparitions, and I found it to be quite interesting since this is a very recent apparition in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And when I attempted to read about it, all what I got was that the church's position is an overall confusion regarding the apparitions, and so I wonder if you could teach me something about this.
So when an apparition is reported, a bishop may choose to begin an investigation of it, and the bishop for that area has in the past has done some investigation and concluded as a result of that investigation that there wasn't sufficient evidence to approve these apparitions, and so they are not approved by the Catholic Church. Now, every apparition that gets popular obviously has followers, otherwise it wouldn't be popular. And when a bishop says, there's no basis for this, or we can't prove it, or things like that, that's a disappointment to the followers of a particular apparition, and there will be a natural tendency on their part to try to portray the results of the bishop's investigation as positively as they can. So they will say things like, oh, well, this doesn't condemn the apparition, or they will say it's not approved yet, implying it will be approved one day. Or if the bishop does outright condemn the apparition, they'll say, well, that was his opinion, but he was misinformed or something like that. In the case of the Garabandal apparitions, they weren't condemned in the sense of this is heretical, but there was an investigation that concluded that it was not shown that there wasn't evidence of them being of genuinely supernatural origin.
Does that help you, Samia?
Yes, it does very much. Thank you very much, Jimmy, and thank you, Sai. God bless your ministry.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless you, and thank you for the call. Our number is 888-318-7884, kind of an opportunity for you. Usually on Thursdays, people know Jimmy's coming, and so the line gets full, and there's some spots you can get in if you've got a question for Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884. Up next, is it all YouTube day? Are we on anywhere else? It's another YouTube viewer. Jim in Greenbelt, Maryland, watching on YouTube Live. You are up next, Jim. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I wanted to ask Jimmy about the remote viewing that he was mentioning earlier. And
Sure.
I know that in the Catechism, it warns us against psychics and things like that, and I wondered if that was covered under that, or if I'm misunderstanding that.
So the Catechism actually doesn't warn us against psychics. What it warns against is divination. And divination is understood, and by the way, we're going to hit the brakes, so I'll have to continue this on the other side. But divination is a practice, and there are different versions of it, but it's a practice that uses improper ways of trying to, for example, predict the future. And what the way the Catechism phrases it is it has a list of practices that it's sounding a caution about, and it identifies the problem with them as they falsely unveil the future. So if something falsely unveils the future, it's something we need to stay away from. There's more to say, though, and we'll say it on the other side of the break.
All right. I hope you can hang on, Jim. We will be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin. Still a couple lines open, 888-318-7884. Right back after this.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
According to divine command, we should give God worship, but how do we know if we're doing it right? Is worship a form of self-help to make me feel better, a form of social activism, or even a commodity? Or is it something that transcends all of those? In Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth, Father Jeff Kirby cuts through the misguided modern notions about God and religion and takes you back to the foundation for true worship, God's revelation about himself. From his first contact with his chosen people to the culmination of his revelation in Jesus Christ, God shows us what religion is supposed to be like and how to make the practice of it a lifelong virtue in our lives. Order your copy of Real Religion by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Matt Swaim here. Join us for a Monday edition of the Sunrise Morning Show when we'll mark the anniversary of the death of servant of God Julia Greeley with Sister Josephine Garrett. Now back to Catholic Answers Live on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Friday afternoon where we are. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Second hour, we got Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Always a lot of fun. This hour, it's open forum. You can ask Jimmy whatever you like. And Jim in Maryland was asking about the morality of remote viewing. And you were explaining some of the distinctions about what's...
So in the Catechism section on divination, it talks about various practices, and actually it's in this, divination is part of what it talks about in the section on superstition. And it talks about various practices. Some of them involve like calling up demons, okay? And actually, people may be surprised to learn this, but in the Middle Ages, there actually was a movement, not an organized movement, but there was a current of thought in the church, including by priests, because they were the educated ones, who were arguing that it's okay to call up demons and then try to bind them in the name of Christ to do your bidding. because the argument was, well, God gave them power and all things come from God, and it's not wrong to use powers that God created. So we could whistle up a demon and then bind him in the name of Christ to do what we want him to do and have him do some kind of good. And St. Thomas Aquinas said, you total fools. You cannot trust these guys. Do not mess with them at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I agree with St. Thomas on that. So does the Catechism. The Catechism says don't have anything to do with demons. Also, the Catechism warns against calling up the spirits of departed human beings because that's explicitly forbidden in the Bible. That's in Deuteronomy. And then it has these other practices that it says falsely unveil the future, so don't mess with them. And it names, among other things, horoscopes and things like that. It also refers to traditional practices, like medical healing practices that may invoke spirits and stuff like that, and it says those are bad too. So it does list a number of different categories of things that we do need to stay away from. But what it doesn't do is say there are no undiscovered or poorly researched human abilities and that we need to stay away from those things. And so there have been Catholic theologians, including doctors of the church, like St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, who, down through the years, who have held that humans have weak natural abilities that today we would call psychic. St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, talked about essentially what we would today call precognition, and which is having a glimpse of the future in one way or another. And he thought humans have this as a natural ability. He called it natural prophecy to distinguish it from the supernatural prophecy that God gives. And he would say, okay, now supernatural prophecy, because it comes from God and God don't make mistakes, that's always right. If God reveals something to a prophet, okay, it's certain. He would say natural prophecy, on the other hand, is driven by human nature picking up on clues that are out there that are hidden to our normal senses. So this is a form of extrasensory perception, or ESP, in modern terms. And it's probabilistic. So it's not guaranteed to be right the way divine prophecy is. That's a subject that the Catechism doesn't address. Are there natural human abilities that go beyond the conventional ones like sight and smell and taste and hearing and so forth? Well, it's not a teaching of the faith that such things don't exist. In fact, there are even you could argue there are some parts of divine revelation that could even suggest this, like how do departed souls communicate? They don't have lips. They don't have vocal tracts.
Oh, right. Yeah.
How do they communicate? It would seem to be some kind of mind-to-mind communication. Also, how about angels? Angels are totally non-physical beings, but they can communicate with each other and they can affect things in the world. They can affect matter, for example, like when the angel rolls away the rock.
Right.
And so, if angels who are purely intellectual beings are able to talk to each other mind to mind, we would call that telepathy. Yeah. And if they're able to move matter around, we would call that telekinesis. So there are even some hints that angelic spirits have those abilities. But guess what? Humans have spirits too.
Right.
Maybe our spirits were not as strong as angels, but maybe our spirits have something like that. And it would then be, it's not a teaching of the faith that we don't. Divine revelation doesn't say that we don't. And so that would then put it in the realm of reason to investigate, do we have such abilities? It would make it a matter for scientific investigation. And various modern parapsychological studies try to do exactly that. They try to investigate, do we have these weak natural abilities that go beyond what we're conventionally aware of? And some people would have looked at the studies and said, yeah, the studies support the existence of these things. Skeptics, on the other hand, look at the studies and say, I don't think so. So it's a matter of debate. If it turned out that God did give us these weak natural abilities, then as long as we would be using them the way he intended, the presumption would be you can use them. Because God didn't give us abilities and then forbid us to use them under all circumstances.
Right.
The presumption would be, unless we have a command from God, which we don't, saying never use these abilities I gave you, then presumably there would be at least some circumstances in which it would be moral to do so. But all of that's beyond the catechism. The catechism doesn't try to address that stuff. It's concerned with specific areas that have already been identified as superstitious.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, that's good information, guys. That expression about false information about the future, I guess, doesn't necessarily mean that the information you're getting is false, but just you're getting it from a bad source that's trying to deceive you in some way or another.
Well, it can mean that, but it also can just be something that's so unreliable it's not worth using. Like if I were to roll a 6-sided die, I'm probably not going to get much information about the future based on a dice roll. So it would be, even if there's no spirit involved, just rolling a die is not a reliable way to predict what's going to happen. So, sorry, the Magic 8-Ball is not really that helpful. You might use it as a party game, but you don't want to actually believe what it tells you. And so whether there's a deceptive source of information involved or whether it's just a wildly unreliable method, you want to be careful of such things.
Jim, thank you. I appreciate the call and the question. Where am I going now? I think I'm going all the way to South Carolina. Timothy in Goose Creek, South Carolina, watching on YouTube Live. Nice to have you with us, Timothy. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, how's it going, Jimmy?
Going okay.
Hey, so I had a quick question. It kind of seems like an apparent contradiction in the Bible when Jesus tells us that we're not supposed to worry, and he talks about the sparrows. But then in the Garden of Gethsemane, he, it seems like there's a lot of anxiety. I mean, he's sweating bullets of blood. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
So when Jesus cautions against worry, he does that in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. And if you read the full context, he says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worry on its own. And he says the worry of the day is sufficient for the day. So what he's cautioning against is not having concern or even anxiety about danger. Anxiety is just another way of saying fear. He's not saying we should never have fear. In fact, elsewhere he says things like, fear the one who can cast body and soul into hell. What he's cautioning against is excessive worry and like dwelling on future disasters that may or may not happen. But he acknowledges that it's okay to have concern about and thus worry about the things you're immediately confronted with. That's what he means when he says that the worry of each day is sufficient for that day. You got enough to worry about today. Don't mess with worrying about the future. Even that is a guideline. He doesn't mean it literally. If you know you've got a disease or something that's going to be worse tomorrow than today, or if you know something could happen tomorrow that would be bad, you could take steps to prevent it today. But this is basically a caution against excessive worry. And so when you're right up to a point where you know you're going to die, which is what Jesus is experiencing in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knows his death is hours away. It is natural to have fear and apprehension. God made us averse to death. We have a natural instinct to fear death and try to avoid it. That's actually a survival strategy. God put that into us so we would try to survive. And so it's actually a healthy instinct to try to be death averse and to try to avoid encountering death. That's a healthy instinct. It serves us well in most cases. But when death is unavoidable, we're still going to have that death aversion. And so it's not unexpected that as Jesus is about to die and knows it, that he's experiencing death aversion as well. That's a natural thing. It's part of human nature, and it's not excessive worry because death is the greatest of the physical evils, and from one perspective, and Jesus is about to encounter it. But you'll notice he's not worrying about his death 3 years from now. He's worrying about it today. So he's accepting the worry of the day, the trouble of the day, being sufficient for the day.
Timothy, thank you so much. Appreciate that question. Lots of folks on the line. We're going to try to get to as many as we can before the top of the hour. Jimmy Akin, our guest. We've got a free ebook for you on the Inquisition and the Crusades. Lots of people would like to have a better understanding of what happened with the Inquisitions of the Crusades. Many Catholics would like to have some explanation that they could offer others when challenged about the Crusades and the Inquisition. Well, you can get this book, The Real Story of the Crusades and the Inquisition, free. It's an ebook available for free at shop.catholic.com.
Catholic Answers Live with Jimmy Akin is coming right back.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Seraphic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
One of the greatest theologians and Franciscan mystics in church history, Bonaventure also wrote a biography of St. Francis that was commissioned by the Franciscans themselves. It took a saint and true mystic to understand a true saint and mystic. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Lots of folks on the line, so right back to the phones we go. Charlene in Eastern Washington State, watching on YouTube Live. You are next, Charlene. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello. I have been a Catholic for 20 years and 1 day.
Hey,
well, congratulations.
Thank you. I just want to share that. My question is this. My mother, like all mothers, is going to die. Mine's going to die fairly soon from chronic disease, which is the thing that happens. She's elderly, and but the question is this: my brother, who is Orthodox, seems to be pushing for my mom. We're kind of all in agreement about cremation, but he's kind of pushing for her remains to be scattered on the waters. Now, we can't concern ourselves with what the Orthodox believe because there are so many different Orthodox churches. No one knows. They don't have a fixed doctrine. But if he were a Catholic, if I was, is it okay for me as a Catholic? Let's pretend that I was saying, she'd really like to have her remains scattered on the waters. Let's do that. Is that okay? Or my particular position that I have taken is I would prefer that she be interred in holy ground. I have a plot. It won't cost you anything. So am I, as a Catholic, allowed to say, yeah, let's scatter our ashes? Also,
is your mom a Catholic, Charlene?
She's not a Catholic. She was baptized by the Lutherans. She's a nominal Christian.
Okay. Since she is not a Catholic, she is not bound by canon law. And therefore, I would say that her wishes in this matter should prevail. Now, you and your brother may want to present her with options and encourage her to think about them, but I wouldn't have either one of you pressure her. This really should be her decision, what she wants to have happen. Does she want to be cremated or not? Does she want her ashes put in a particular, to be interred somewhere or scattered? It's really a question for her. It is not the traditional Catholic way to honor the dead to scatter ashes. 100 years ago, it wasn't, or a little more than that, it actually wasn't even the Catholic way to have cremation. But cremation is not against divine law. unless you load it up with other, assumptions like I'm doing this as a sign of defiance of the resurrection or something. There's nothing wrong with the cremation itself. There are good prudential reasons for keeping ashes together, and that's part of why it's our custom, but it's not a matter of divine law that you have to keep the ashes together. In fact, there are lots of situations in the world, historically especially. I mean, most people's bodies have not survived the ages intact. They haven't always been in one place. If you do a burial at sea, for example, which is perfectly legitimate, without cremation, sea life forms are going to deal with the body. If you haven't embalmed somebody by mummification or by using something like formaldehyde, then microorganisms, if you bury them in the ground, microorganisms are going to result in the body not remaining fully intact. And so you don't have to, by divine law, struggle to keep every atom of the person's body in one location. Historically, because of the way Catholic culture has evolved, and for prudential reasons, it has not been our way to scatter ashes. And so canon law does not allow the scattering of ashes for Catholics. But your mom is not a Catholic, and so she would not be violating divine law if she chose to have her ashes scattered. She wouldn't be violating church law since she's not a Catholic and is not bound by church law. And so I would say it's really up to her to make this decision. And while you and your brother can present her with options and tell her which ones you would personally prefer, I wouldn't fight about it. Now, in terms of what happens afterwards, so if your mom said, well, I would like to be cremated and have my ashes scattered, you would not be doing anything wrong to say, okay, I accept that, and I love you, and we'll carry out your wishes, because she is not bound to do things. She's not a Catholic, and she's not bound to do things the Catholic way. You could similarly attend the service and participate in it as a sign of love and respect, not just for your mom, but for all of your relatives. And so that's kind of a general sketch of how I'd approach the subject. Now, if your mom is not currently in a position to make this decision, not everybody has full mental function as they near the end of their life, well, then it's something that you and your siblings may need to figure out. But regardless of what happens, I would strive to not make this a family-breaking issue, because it doesn't need to be. I would suggest that everybody approach this as serenely as they can without staking out this must or must not happen positions, because the fact is your mom has freedom. If she had full use of her faculties, it would be entirely up to her to decide what she wants. And so because that means these various options are on the table, morally speaking, and so nobody should stake out, we must do it this way, and I'm going to be mad at you forever if we don't.
Charlene, thank you so much. I hope that was helpful to you. Lots of folks on the line, so I am going to keep moving and try to get folks on with Jimmy before we have to end this hour. Next hour, weird questions with Jimmy Akin. So Jimmy will stay with us, and we'll do some weird questions. Roy in Houston, Texas, listening on AM 1430 Guadalupe Radio. You are next, Roy. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey there. So I had a question about the Trinity. Basically, not the reason for it, but why did God create it? Because he's omnipresent, right? So realistically, God the Father could have come down and done everything. So
God didn't create the Trinity. This is part of what we say in the Creed when we, for example, talk about the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll say that the Son was begotten, not made. So the Son is not made, he's not a creature. And the same, he's not created. And the same is true of the Holy Spirit. They both come from the Father eternally outside of time. So the Son and the Spirit have just always been there. They are as persons, the Son is begotten by the Father, and the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father through the Son, but that's an eternal relationship that has never changed and can never change. So the Trinity just exists. It is not something that ever has been different. In terms of God's actions outside of the Trinity, the theologians typically understand that all three persons cooperate in every action that God does outside of the Trinity. So, for example, you may notice passages in the New Testament that talk about the role of the Son in the act of creation. They'll say that, at the beginning of John's Gospel, for example, it talks about how everything was created through the Logos, through Jesus, through the Son. And there are other passages where St. Paul talks about how everything was created through him. And if you look in the Psalms, it talks about how the heavens were made by the Word of God, that's the Son, and by the breath of his mouth, that's the Spirit. The word for spirit and breath are the same in Hebrew and Greek. So we see in that passage the Father depicted as speaking the world into creation through his word and his breath, and that indicates a cooperation of all three persons in the Trinity. And it's understood similarly that when it comes to the work of redemption that occurred at the time of Jesus, all three persons again cooperated, but they have different roles. So the Father sent Jesus, Jesus was the one to come, and the Holy Spirit also played a role in this. He played a role in raising Jesus from the dead, and he was there at Pentecost, and he applies grace and promotes conversion to Jesus. And so again, all three persons are cooperating, but they play different roles. Now, could God have chosen to do it differently? It's an interesting question. The church doesn't have a teaching on that point, so I would say it's a matter of speculation. Could God have made different choices about which person of the Trinity would do what? But it would only be a matter of speculation. What we do know is these are the choices God made, and that all three persons are involved in everything that God does outside of his inner life.
Roy, thank you. I'm going to keep moving, see if we can get one more, at least one more in before we have to go. Ed in Alexandria, Virginia. I think you are next, Ed. Ed watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Ed, with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, guys. Big fans of both of you. I'm reading your book,
thank you, Ed.
Now, and any number of Jimmy's books, and, of course, Mysterious World, so I'm a really big fan of both. Thanks for taking my call. My question is, in Matthew 27, it refers to the veil of the temple being rent and from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if, are we to take that literally, that literally happened?
Yeah, I don't see why not. It's not, and it's not just reported in Matthew, but this is in
other places as well.
Yeah, this is a report that we find in the gospel tradition. There's while it does have symbolic value, and there are several different proposed things that this could symbolize. Just because an action has symbolic value doesn't mean that it didn't literally happen. It's like when Jesus rides into Jerusalem at the triumphal entry, he's riding on a donkey, he's fulfilling Old Testament prophecy, and there is symbolic value because he's saying by this riding in this way, I'm the Messiah. So there is symbolic value, but it still really happened. And in the same way, the tearing of the temple would seem, I have no reason to say that it's purely a symbol. It occurs in a historical narrative. It occurs in multiple different documents. And there are other reports from this general time period of very unusual things happening in the temple. If you go to the Jewish historian Josephus, for example, he talks about similar signs occurring in the temple as its destruction was approaching. Uh-huh. And this is, if you notice, there's a connection between Jesus and the temple in the Gospels. Jesus physically represents the temple. So like in John, he says, tear down this temple and in 3 days I'll raise it up. and he's talking about his body. The destruction of Jesus' body on the cross foreshadows the destruction of the temple, and thus it's natural to find these omens occurring both when Jesus dies and in AD 70 when the temple's about to be destroyed.
Ed, thank you very much for that question. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to more, but we got to a lot. But we had a good supply of callers, so we'll have to ask you to call next week, because next hour it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. People send us weird questions, and Jimmy gathers them up for us, and every now and then we take an hour to answer them. We'll do that right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Time to get weird. Weird questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. I'll probably accidentally give out the phone number and make various other mistakes like that. That's just how I roll. But,
Don't worry, we'll all laugh when you do that.
But the important thing is you're not laughing with me. You're laughing at me.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, let me just tell you right now, we're not taking calls this hour. Hang on and enjoy, because we've got weird questions for Jimmy, and people have put a lot of thought into some of these weird questions.
Yeah, they have.
I imagine some people are just naturally weird, and they didn't have to put much thought into it. But for others, I'm sure it's a challenge.
I'll leave that between them and their hairdressers.
Is that a thing?
You remember that commercial, right?
I do now. I knew it was something.
Is it her natural color or Miss Clairol? That's between her and her hairdresser. Flashbacks to the 1970s.
Yeah, right. It's wild when you get those little flashbacks. Darren, are you familiar with the TV show I Dream of Jeannie? You've heard of it before? Okay, good. Just checking. Got to see if the young kids are up on all this new stuff. Let's try out a weird question from Nick.
Okay.
I understand the Catholic Church bans membership in secret societies for many reasons, especially since historically groups like the Freemasons were seen as anti-clerical. I was wondering, how secret does a secret society need to be? I recall when I was inducted in the Honor Society Phi Beta Kappa, it was brought up there were secret rituals, but done away with during the anti-Masonic movement in the 19th century. So would it have been illicit for a Catholic to be in something like this when the secrecy was in place? From my understanding, lots of fraternities had histories like this. The only one to my knowledge that keeps the secrecy is Yale's Skull and Bones. Would that also be banned from the Catholic point of view?
So actually, Skull and Bones is not the only secret society that's still out there. In fact, it's not even the only secret society at Yale. Yale University, it has rivalries with at least a couple of other secret societies. One of them is called Scroll and Key. Another is called Wolf's Head. And they play pranks on each other and steal each other's stuff and brag about it internally and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Good college hijinks.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the church doesn't actually ban membership in secret societies. That's not what canon law says. And it isn't what canon law said under the 1917 code, because I went back and checked. Because this canon was modified. Originally, and I knew it was modified, the 1917 version of the canon mentioned Masonic organizations specifically, but it was broader than that. And then what happened was they made it more general in the they just took out the reference to the Masons and just talked about the principle. But the principle that was articulated both in the 1917 code and in the 1983 code of canon law was Catholics are forbidden to join organizations that plot against the church. So it's not secrecy that's the issue. It's plotting against the church that's the issue. Because if you're a Catholic, you shouldn't be plotting against the church. Duh.
That seems very, very obvious.
Yeah. And so it's actually okay to be members of secret societies, provided they're using their powers for good. So, you could join, let's say, the CIA or something, as long as you're not working on Project MK Ultra, which was bad. But you could join other groups that have secret stuff, like the Knights of Columbus until recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because their initiation oath was secret for a long time. And the reason is, actually, this stuff kind of goes back to the 19th century, because back in the 19th century, they didn't have the internet. And so there was a question of what are you going to do when you have free time, because they didn't have the enormous time suck of the internet. And so what they would do if you were a man, you don't want to spend all your time dealing with domestic issues. You want to go out and be with the guys some. And so they had these men's clubs that were in the 19th century. A lot of them got started, and it was the hip, cool thing to be in a secret men's club.
Like the Ancient Order of the Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. From the Flintstones. water buffalo.
A water buffalo. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Freemasons were part of that. They actually got started before the 19th century, but the Freemasons were one such group. There were lots of others as well, and Catholics could be interested in such things. But, here in America, all these other men's groups, they're Protestant, and what's the Catholic alternative?
Yeah.
So that's how we got the Knights of Columbus. And, another big thing in the 19th century, because everyone was reading Sir Walter Scott, was chivalry. People are reading Ivanhoe and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're going to be the Knights of Columbus, and we're going to have secret oaths just like those other guys, only ours will be less violent. And so this was a way for Catholic men to kind of get in on some of that same secret club action, only using their powers for good. But it was still a secret thing. And as long as your secret special chocolate fudgy club is doing good stuff rather than bad stuff, it's okay.
All right. Thank you very much for the question, Nick. Appreciate it. Some of these questions are a little long, and I know that the listener will be like, just get to the question, but I enjoy reading them. So this one's from Patrick. My friends have asked me to pray with phrases like, I bind Satan in the name of Jesus. I bind all demons for the sake of the blood of Christ. I bind, I cast out. I am uncomfortable with the idea of invoking any power to bind or otherwise command evil spirits to do anything. The idea of addressing evil spirits is alien, repugnant, and even sounds occultic to me. However, some priests on the internet pray in this way and recommend that their viewers do likewise. Prayers are or should be addressed to God and for the intercession of angels and saints before God in heaven. Among the things we can pray for are conversion and the conversion of sinners. When I mention this, I'm accused of neglecting the urgent need for spiritual warfare. Is there a charitable way to tell my friends that confronting demons in this way is highly not recommended? I have to be marginalized by the prayer groups that insist on these formulas. Oh, if I have to, I'm ready for that.
So this is a very interesting question. It has several aspects. Now, I understand why using language like I bind you or I bind demons or whatever. I understand why that would be uncomfortable for several reasons. One reason is this is a traditional part, this binding language actually has a really long history. And it's not exclusively Christian. This language shows up in various rituals of a non-Christian nature, and in fact, now, I would say what magic is, it's a ritual that's not approved in a given culture.
Okay.
And that's the difference between a religious ritual and a magic ritual. Is the religious ritual is the one that's approved culturally, and the magic ritual is the shady, unapproved one.
Okay.
Well, okay, binding language shows up in both, but it does show up in a lot of magic rituals, like in the Greco-Roman world.
Okay.
You will find incantations, ritual words that use this binding language for a variety of purposes. Sometimes it's, if you have the image of binding, you're tying something.
Yeah.
And so one thing you can do is tie up your enemies magically so they can't mess with you. And so you'll find these curses that are like, I bind so-and-so, my evil business nemesis that's running the competing bakery across town.
Right.
So he can't mess with me magically.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that kind of curse binding. Then it also gets used in love magic, where you'll have you'll be reading one of these incantations and it'll be like, I bind Barbara the Beautiful to me so that she'll totally fall in love with me and we can have lots of babies and stuff.
That seems so unfair to Barbara the Beautiful.
Well, there is this kind of violent aspect to the love magic that has been pointed out. You also find binding in another way, even in Christian contexts. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's a prayer. Probably was not really written by St. Patrick's, but it's called St. Patrick's breastplate or the Lorica of St. Patrick. Are you
I have
familiar
heard
with
of that.
it?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I couldn't quote it to you.
So it starts with an invocation of the Trinity, but then it goes on from there to start talking about binding elements of God's creation to the one who's praying it. So it'll be like, I bind the flashing of lightning to myself, and I bind the fierce winds to myself, and the power of fire to myself, and it's naming all these elements of nature in God's creation, asking to be protected. So this is yet another kind of binding that's out there. And it's got a part of Christian tradition. I mean, it's right there in St. Patrick's breastplate. It's also not just there. I was reading a book of Egyptian rituals once, Christian rituals that we've dug up in Egypt because that's where it's dry and the papyrus survives. And they would have rituals that were kind of like sacramentals. One of them was a prayer to get a dog to shut up.
Oh, I need that one.
Yeah, and in that one, if I recall correctly, and I may be misremembering, but if I recall correctly, the one who praying it is invoking the Trinity and asking God to bind that dog so it won't bark during the night. And so this binding language gets used. Now, okay, you might say, well, it's been used by pagans, so we shouldn't ever use binding language.
Yeah.
Except, what do we read in Matthew 16? You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So Jesus himself, and also in Matthew 18, used binding language to articulate spiritual authority being given to the disciples.
Yeah.
And so given that it's right there in the Gospels, this binding language is going to find a place in Christian tradition. So we can't say, oh, pagans did this, we can't.
Right.
So there is a place for binding language in the church. The question is, who should be using it and when? Well, one problem with ordinary people confronting demons and doing this binding language is ordinary lay people, I mean, they've got a certain kind of authority because they share the common priesthood of the baptized, but they don't have authority beyond that. They don't have the kind of authority that an ordained priest has, or much less the kind of authority that's been delegated to an exorcist. And so the church is much more hesitant about ordinary people engaging with demons in this way. And I think there's good reason for that. I've seen people, not specifically in the Catholic context, but there are in some of our Protestant friends, including in the Pentecostal movement, who do this kind of stuff also. You know, they'll be binding demons and things like that. And that's and they'll be kind of cavalier about it. You know. But it's something that you have to be careful about because, like we see in the book of Acts, there's one place where an exorcist who's not authorized is trying to cast out demons in Jesus' name, and also mentions Paul, and the demon just eats his lunch for him.
Yeah.
You know. Also, if you look in Jude verses 9 and 10, Jude is giving a warning about being cavalier with respect to various spirits. And he says, when the archangel Michael contended with the devil, disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume. So this is Michael himself, the prince of the heavenly host. He did not presume to pronounce a reviling judgment upon him, that is, upon the devil, but said, the Lord rebuke you. But these men revile whatever they do not understand. So Jude is warning against taking a too cavalier attitude.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you know, Satan, I condemn you, that kind of stuff. Okay, even Michael didn't do that, is what he's saying. So I would say there's something of a balance to be struck here. By the way, before I get to that, I also wanted to mention one other thing, which is Patrick mentioned prayers or utterances like this being addressed only to God. Actually, you know, Jesus does address demons directly and say things like, get out of this guy.
Right.
Jesus even addresses non-animate thing or non-intelligent
like the
things.
fig tree.
Well, the fig tree, he curses the fig tree. He also rebukes the wind and the waves to calm them down. And that's in Mark 4. And in Luke 4, he rebukes a fever and tells the fever to get lost. And so I wouldn't be exclusive about you can only address God or the saints. There is this precedent for even addressing inanimate things. And of course, Jesus knows the fever is not an intelligent being, but it's still okay for him to address it and use his power or draw on the power of his Father to get rid of it. And this is just one way of demonstrating that. So actually, I take a fairly generous approach or fairly open approach to these things as modes of speech, but you want to be really careful. And you don't want to be cavalier about it. And I understand the concern for I don't want to do this. And I would say in terms of talking to your friends, even though I wouldn't outright say this can never be done, I would point out, look, there are these cautions, and we want to be careful. I'm aware of one priest on the internet who actually has taken excerpts from the Rite of Exorcism and just tweaked it a little bit. So the lady was the lady, but instead of saying I cast you out, it'll be like I ask Jesus to cast you out.
Oh, I see.
But this is still kind of iffy to me. What I would say is there are prayers that the church has approved for use by the laity of deliverance prayers. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops put out a booklet of them. I would suggest getting that and using that if it's your thing. Of course, you can also have impromptu prayers. You don't have to use a fixed one. But it's not everybody who is called to engage in this kind of stuff. And I would say to this group, there are some risks here you need to be aware of, you need to be careful, and this is not my thing. God calls us to different things, and this just happens to not be one of mine.
Patrick, thank you. We got to take a quick break. Right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
I didn't take my faith seriously, which probably means I never really got it to begin with. No, I didn't want to give up sin. The reason we sin is because sin is fun. But it's self-love sin. But it's amazing with God's grace how easy trying to not sin it really is.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for whatever reason, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. It's always fun on a Friday to do some weird questions with Jimmy Akin, and we got a bunch of weird questions this hour. This one comes from Cynthia. Cynthia writes, I'm a budding Revolutionary War reenactor in the Ohio Valley, the frontier of the U.S. in that time frame. Oh, I see what she's saying. Yes. Okay. We're Catholics. We're Catholics even here during. I think she means we're Catholics even here during that time period. How would they fulfill their yearly confession and mass attendance obligation? I've always wanted to portray a Catholic, but I'm struggling to find any info. My husband prefers Civil War, so I also have kind of the same question about the same thing. What would a Catholic portrayal of a Civil War Catholic look like? Any resources for how to find actual people to base my portrayal on to honor the real Catholics that were here for those pivotal times of history?
So
nice.
I'm not an expert in the history of the Ohio Valley, but I would expect there were at least some Catholics there, not very many during the Revolutionary War era. But there were American Catholics at the time. Many of them were in the state of Maryland, which was specifically set up as a place of religious liberty so that Catholics could go there and not be persecuted. Although even in Maryland, the majority were Protestants, but that's where you had a lot of Catholics. It was founded, incidentally, by Lord Baltimore, who was a Catholic. And that's why he was interested in setting up this kind of Catholic haven in the colonies. And that's why the capital is called Baltimore, after Lord Baltimore. But, they didn't just stay in Maryland. There were Catholics elsewhere, and I'm sure there were some in the Ohio Valley. In terms of how they fulfilled their Sunday obligation and their Easter obligation, as best as they could.
Yeah.
This was frontier territory, and they often didn't have access to churches and priests. One of the ways that people in the early Americas tried to help with that was by having priests who were circuit riders. And they would go around. It's kind of like a priest today in some, out in a remote area may have multiple parishes he drives around to. Back then, they would have circuit riding priests who would get on a horse and travel to the different locations. And when they were able to come, the Catholics in the area would get together and they'd have confessions and mass and things like that. But it was kind of catch as catch can in some locations. In terms of the Civil War, so by the time of the Civil War, there were a lot more Catholics in America. There's still a minority, but there had been waves of French immigration and German immigration and Irish immigration. The potato famine occurred in the 1840s, 20 years before the Civil War, and Polish immigration. I was reading a memoir of the Civil War once called Company H by a guy named Sam Watkins, and he talks about a particular Polish officer. If I recall his name, they called him like General Auliduski, which he both wasn't a general and that wasn't really his name.
But that's what they kind of heard. They put the American spin on a Polish name.
Exactly. And so he tells amusing stories about him. But you had Catholics on both sides in the Civil War. In terms of how to find out about specific Catholics. Now, you can always, just say, you can always make up a persona for reenacting purposes. You could say, well, I'm a Catholic who just arrived in the Ohio Valley from Baltimore or something like that,
right.
For the Revolutionary War. But if you want to find out about real Catholics who lived in these periods, the place to go primarily, I would say, would be the local historical societies, at least for the Revolutionary War, because there's less information about that. Some ways you could proceed in gathering some information would be go to the diocese and ask the diocese, what parishes existed at this time.
Oh, yeah.
And are there any cemeteries, any Catholic cemeteries from this time that I could go to and gather names, or, look at a parish register or a baptismal register, and then take the names you find and go to the Historical Society and say, do you have any information on these or other Catholics from this period?
How cool. That's
And
great.
they may be able to do things like show you newspapers or things like that could give you additional information. Obviously, census records are another thing. Once you know the person is Catholic, you can then look in the census record. Also, you could just look in census records and, for example, look for Irish names or French names or Polish names or something. And then for the Civil War, there's a lot more information available because there are different Civil War societies that work actively. I'm more familiar with them than the Revolutionary War societies, although I know they exist too. But checking with these societies that are trying to preserve the memory of these times, you can ask for, what do you know about Catholics that were involved in these events?
Cynthia, fascinating. That was a good, weird question. Didn't see that one coming. And I hope that you have success in finding what you're looking for. No phone number today. All the questions have come to us via the internet. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. And up next, this question comes from Stephanie. My whole family loves Mysterious World. I'm assuming she means Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, available every Friday on the internet. My son has a weird question. My son wants to know if it's moral to kill vampire-human hybrids. Oh, I like this kid. The question is inspired by the second Blade movie when the character Abraham kills the hybrid fetuses.
So I haven't seen the second Blade movie, and I don't know the details of how the vampire-human hybrids work in that movie. But what I can address is the principles, and I'll probably need to continue this on the other side of the break. But basically, it's going to depend on a few things. One of the things it's going to depend on is the degree of freedom that these hybrids have.
Oh, yeah.
If they have the freedom to resist their vampire instincts and get their needs, like if they need to drink blood, but they can get it in some other way than by attacking people, then it's not going to be okay to kill them because there are other better alternatives. Also, even if they don't have the freedom to resist, if they're just like animalistic, what a good cliffhanger.
Oh, we're leaving it there on the human vampire hybrids. I wish she had given her son's name so we could tell him how cool his question is. But Stephanie's son, great question. We'll be right back to find out under what circumstances you can get busy, young man, killing those human vampire hybrids. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and he desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of his will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Matt Swaim here. Join us for a Monday edition of the Sunrise Morning Show when we'll mark the anniversary of the death of servant of God Julia Greeley with Sister Josephine Garrett. Now back to Catholic Answers Live on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest, which is a good thing because it's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. And Stephanie has an awesome son, and he wants to know if it would be moral for him to kill vampire-human hybrids.
So we covered if the vampire-human hybrids have sufficient freedom to resist their instincts and are able to get their needs met in another way. No, you can't kill them in that case. If one of them goes rogue and starts attacking people, well, you can kill them at that point, just like you could kill a normal human who goes rogue and starts killing people. On the other hand, what if the vampire-human hybrids don't have the freedom to resist their impulses, so they're just animalistic attackers who are going to attack no matter what you do? There's no reasoning with them. Well, still, you can't automatically kill them, just like you can't automatically kill a tiger.
Oh, yeah, right. Just because it can attack a human being.
There may be other ways to deal with it that are safe. So you maybe keep these vampire-human hybrids in zoos and things like that, and have the Vampire-Human Hybrid King show on Netflix or whatever.
Instead of Tiger King.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right.
But that would even be weirder, I guess.
It's hard, but it would be weirder.
But if you can take care of them safely in some other way, then you couldn't just kill them. On the other hand, if they are just a threat, yes, you can kill them to protect other people. Now, there's then a question of, because part of this was about embryos.
Right.
And the question didn't ask about the embryos, but since it was mentioned, I'll discuss it anyway. So embryos are just immature forms of a life form. Mm-hmm. And if something is not a human, and there's a question about would a vampire-human hybrid, it's going to depend on how much vampire DNA versus human DNA it's got in it. Would it count as a human or not? Let's assume that it is a human. I would say, even though it is a potential future danger, you could not kill it as an embryo because it's still innocent at this point. It's not a threat while it's in the tank or whatever it's in.
Right.
If it's a human, you've got to wait until it becomes a threat, or at least is posing some kind of proximate danger to people, to kill it at that point. On the other hand, let's suppose they're not humans and they're just like animalistic vampires that don't even have the full use of reason. Well, then it's in the same category as animals. And I would say if I came across a nest of rattlesnake eggs in an area where if these things hatch, they're going to kill people.
Right.
And I don't have a better alternative, I could go ahead and step on the rattlesnake eggs.
Yeah.
And so I would say there would be some situations where it could potentially be legitimate to preemptively deal with non-human vampire-human hybrids in this way, even at an early stage of life. But you got to meet a whole bunch of conditions for that to be legitimate.
What about a rattlesnake omelet?
Well, I wouldn't want one if the rattlesnake eggs were fertilized.
Oh yeah, all right, fair enough.
If you have a supply of unfertilized rattlesnake eggs, then maybe.
Maybe.
I have eaten rattlesnake before.
Have you?
Yeah.
Does it taste like chicken?
Well, it's a reptile, so of course it does.
Yeah.
I mean, dinosaurs, chickens themselves are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean, they're surviving birds are a surviving type of dinosaur. And so, things, reptiles, birds, they all kind of taste the same. Although when I ate crocodile, it tasted like a combination of chicken and catfish.
Oh,
because
really?
It's a water-dwelling creature, and it has this oily, fishy bottom dweller type taste like a catfish merged with the chicken.
Stephanie, once again, thank your son for that very, very fine question. And should we approach any kind of vampire apocalypse? I hope he'll be there to defend me. Edith asks this, Jimmy. Assuming the theory of human evolution as popularly understood is correct, are we to assume that the human soul evolved alongside the growing capabilities of the human mind and body? For example, from vegetative to sensitive to rational. If so, at what point in human evolution would the jump have been made to each stage? And what would be the status of the souls of early proto-humans who died before people achieved the capacity for higher souls? In a related question, where do archaic human subspecies fit into this? Can we make any guesses on whether they had rational souls? And if so, can we expect to see Neanderthals and Denisovans, etc., in the hereafter?
So there are several things here. This is actually several questions rolled into one, but I'll do my best
but
to
good ones.
explore
These are good.
them. Yeah. In the case of the human soul, there has been a discussion historically about whether it's inherited from the parents the way the body is, or whether it's directly created by God. The first position, that the soul is produced by the parents and thus is inherited, is a position known as traducianism. The other, that the soul is directly created by God from nothing, is known as creationism. Historically, there's been, as I indicated, a discussion on this question. In 1950, Pope Pius XII landed in favor of creationism. So that's the position of the church today, that the human soul is directly created by God from nothing. Now, he didn't teach that infallibly, but that's the church's position. So that kind of settles the question for true humans or biblical humans. Their souls did not evolve. They're created directly by God, and they also wouldn't have passed through the vegetative, sensitive, rational stages. When you're born, you have the soul you always have,
Right.
and your body may manifest and grow in different ways under the guidance of your soul, but it's still the same soul. So even an unborn baby, even if it doesn't have a brain yet, it's got a rational soul. It's just the body hasn't developed to the point of allowing the rationality to manifest yet. So where there were vegetative and sensitive souls, pre-rational ones, that would be in our evolutionary history, not within the human species itself. Now, what about the souls of non-humans? Here we don't know. The church has not taken a position. It could be that their souls are inherited. Traducianism could be true for non-human creatures, in which case the vegetative souls of non-intelligent animals could have evolved alongside their bodies, and then for intelligent animals that have sensitive souls, their souls could have evolved, and even among hominid ancestors of mankind, their souls could have evolved alongside their bodies up to the point that God started biblical humans and started creating their souls from nothing.
Yeah.
It could be that way. That's a matter of speculation. It also could be that God has been creating every single soul of every life form from nothing all the way down through history.
Right.
That's also a possibility.
Right.
So we don't really know there. It's a matter of speculation. In terms of how other closely related human subspecies like Neanderthals and Denisovans, would they count as biblical humans? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it would simply be a matter of speculation. I think that I can't say for sure. I would tend, if I were confronted with them, I would tend to err on the side of regarding them as human. In biblical humans. I would evangelize them.
Oh, sure. I see what you mean, if they were here.
And if they said, I want to be baptized, I want to get in on this Jesus eternal life stuff,
right,
then I would baptize them. And we do have evidence that they, were able to do a lot of things like count, and they used rituals to bury their dead, and they have grave goods, which suggest that they have a concept of the afterlife. And if you've got a concept of God and the afterlife and things like that, or one or the other, if you think about God or if you think about the afterlife, I assume you have the same basic rational kind of soul.
Right.
So I would assume that I would err on the side of saying these guys are fellow rational humans and biblical humans. Can't prove that, but that would be my personal speculation. What if they're not? What if even though they're very similar to us, they're not biblical humans? Well, I would say, would they be in the afterlife, which is one of the questions she asked? I would say we don't know. We don't know that for animals. Now, it's been a common theological opinion that non-rational souls don't survive death, but that's not church teaching. That's theological speculation. And if you've got a soul that is on the verge of full human rationality, I don't know, maybe it's rational enough to survive death. Rationality is not an on or off thing. It comes in degrees.
Yeah, right.
And so I would say that that I don't know whether these guys will be in heaven or not, but certainly if I ever met them, I would do my best to make sure they get there.
Edith, thank you so much for that question. Maybe we'll get a question when we come back about Neanderthal vampire hybrids. We'll see. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin right back after this.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The world over with Raymond Arroyo. Coverage as seen through a Catholic lens.
All people of faith and sincerity need to awaken to this and protect this fundamental right of religious liberty.
Expert analysis.
Does Revelation judge history, or does history judge Revelation?
Stories vital to people of faith.
It's part of our faith that comedy and tragedy naturally go hand in hand.
Delivered to your inbox every week. Sign up today. Go to EWTN.com/worldover.
World premiere of our new, you like it, guys? Music for Jimmy.
And it's got your theremin in there that you requested, Cy Kellett.
We have to say thank you to Eric and Nato.
Yeah.
That is just so beautiful. I love that. Can we use that every time we do this show now? I mean, we waited till the very end to premiere it. That's the world premiere. I don't know we have a name for it. Let's call it Theme from Weird Questions. How about we call it that? I titled it Theme from Weird Questions.
Okay.
Because we were doing the show.
Unless we find out they have a name for it.
Oh,
in which
sure.
case we should honor theirs.
Oh, yeah, whatever title they give it. But they didn't send us a title. So for now, I'll call it Theme for Weird Questions by Eric and Nato. I specifically asked if anyone could write a theme for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, like we have a theme for the game show. And I expressed the desire that it would have theremin in it. And what do these guys do? They put theremin in it. So
we should mention for people who don't know what a theremin is, it's a kind of electronic instrument, and it makes these ooh noises.
Could we, I'm going to go to the next question, which is from an anonymous person, but is there any chance you could play it again? I just want to hear it again. It's not that long. I'll go to the question first, and when we come back, we'll have our...
I think you missed one.
Oh, yeah, I got to go to the top here. Sorry. I will do Steven's question. So it's not an anonymous question. We have Steven next, and then we'll once again hear a theme from Weird Questions from Eric and Nato, to whom we are just so grateful.
Yeah.
That was really beautiful to get that.
Very talented guys.
I know. That was, yeah. It was exciting to get it. Stephen asks this question, Jimmy. If the farthest known galaxy is about 13 billion light years away from the Earth, and if it took 13 billion years for light from that galaxy to reach Earth, then how did the galaxy and Earth become so far apart from each other if they themselves have not been moving away from each other at the speed of light for 13 billion years? I know that our solar system moves through space at only a small fraction of the speed of light. Also, I realize that our solar system and Earth have not been in existence for 13 billion years, but presumably the particles from which they are made are at least that old and somehow arrived at their current location. So you see what he's saying.
Okay.
We have a problem.
So there are a couple of things here. Now, it's very common for people to imagine that the entire universe was compressed at the Big Bang was compressed into a single point. We don't know that to be the case, but it was much smaller and hotter than it is now. But we don't know whether it was a single point or not. That's something that's a matter of speculation. When the Big Bang occurred about 13.7, 13.8 billion years ago, within a fraction of a second of the Big Bang, a phenomenon, and this is the common scientific account today.
Right.
It is not definitive. Science is always subject to revision, but according to the common scientific account today, within a fraction of a second of the Big Bang, I think it was like 10 to the minus 36 seconds.
About that, roughly.
A phenomenon began known as inflation.
Yeah.
And in the inflation process, the universe expanded within just another fraction of a second massively. It increased in size by, I want to say, if I recall, 100 septillion times bigger. So that's 10 to the 26th. The universe just in a fraction of a second, like between 10 to the minus 6 and 10 to the minus 32 seconds, wham, the universe is 100 septillion times larger.
So things are already millions of light years apart, or billions of light years apart.
Millions of at least.
Within less than a second.
After the Big Bang.
After the Big Bang, got it. Okay.
And then inflation shut off.
Yeah.
And so the rate of the universe's expansion slowed. And it continued to slow or be slow until the universe was about 5 billion years old. And then another process known as is produced by what's theoretically described as dark energy began increasing the expansion rate of the universe, which is why the universe is accelerating now. So the universe has not, according to the standard scientific account, accelerated or expanded smoothly.
Yeah.
It had a huge initial rush outward, and then it slowed down, and now it's speeding up again, but not nearly as fast. But that huge initial rush was much faster than the speed of light. And that's possible because even though matter moving through space is light speed limited, space itself is not light speed limited. And so these faster than light expansions can happen. And actually, even today, there are some points in the universe that are accelerating away from us faster than light. And as a result, the stars that we can see today at the very edge, because they're accelerating away from us faster than the speed of light, they drop over the universe's cosmic horizon. And we actually lose about 20,000 stars per second to the acceleration over the cosmic horizon.
And I didn't even miss them until now, and now I regret that.
But all of this expansion is why the universe is not just 13 or 14 billion light years across. It's actually the radius of the universe is 46 billion light years, and the visible universe itself is 92 billion light years across. But we know that's only a fraction of the true size of the universe. We can tell based on measurements of the microwave radiation out in the universe. It's called the cosmic microwave background. It's the earliest energy we can see from about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. We can tell by measuring the cosmic microwave background that the universe is at least 250 times bigger than what we can see.
And what we can see is 13 billion.
Is 92 billion light years across.
Oh, yeah.
And so yes, it's true. There are galaxies that are 13 billion light years away, and we can see them.
Yeah.
But given that the universe is so much bigger than what we can see, it doesn't mean that we and that galaxy 13 billion years ago started at the same point. We could have, at least within a fraction of a second after the Big Bang, already been millions of light years away.
Right.
And so even though we're not moving, since this galaxy is on this side of the cosmic horizon and let's say is not about to drop over it, even though we're not moving faster than light with respect to each other, it's taken 13 billion years for the light from it to reach us.
Right, because that did travel through space.
That did travel through space, and light does move. At what speed does light move, Cy Kellett?
I would say about 167,000 miles a second.
186.
186.
But I just meant, I was setting you up for an easy. The light moves at the speed of light.
Oh, I see. I could have got away with that.
It's not required that we and that other galaxy started at exactly the same point because the universe is much bigger. It could have started at a somewhat distant point from us, and it's just taken that long for the light to reach us. So that's a basic explanation. It can kind of be tricky to understand the dynamics of this with all that expansion in different ways happening, but that's the basic answer. We don't have to be moving at at the speed of light with respect to each other. Although if it is 13 billion light years away, we're moving at a pretty good clip
away
from perspective. And locally, we may only be moving, but all that space between us continues to expand.
Yeah. Stephen, great question. Thank you very much. We asked, and Eric and NATO answered, and we just had the world premiere of the theme, I'm calling it this. They didn't call it this, but the theme for Jimmy Akin's, for when he comes here to do Weird Questions with us. So the theme from Weird Questions, can we just hear it again? Because I just thought it was great. That's the theremin. I love it. Eric and Nato, thank you so much for the theme for this.
I really like that closing part of it. That's really cool.
The whole thing it's very well done. Very well done. All right, I'm going to try to get you another question here, Jimmy. Anonymous asks, well, first of all, Anonymous says, I'm not exaggerating when I say that Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin is the highest form of edutainment I've ever seen. I'm with you, Anonymous, and certainly the most restful content on the Catholic internet. It makes me enjoy thinking again. Anyway, on to the question. In the early 90s, when there was a sci-fi show called Quantum Leap about a man named Sam who travels through time by leaping into other people, in one episode, he leaps into a priest right when he's supposed to say, "You may kiss the bride." Later, he tries to hear a confession but gets interrupted. My question is, if Sam, who's not ordained, actually carried out these sacraments while leaped into the priest, would they be valid and or licit? A perfect Weird Question for Jimmy Akin.
Okay, so I remember the show Quantum Leap from the 90s. It starred
Captain Archer.
Captain Archer,
Scott
Bakula,
yeah.
As well as the guy who played number 1 on Battlestar Galactica, whose name I'm blanking on. But I saw a few episodes of it and I liked it, but I've never watched the whole thing, and so I may at some point. But I needed to answer this question to find out how the time travel works, because if he's just leaping into the body of a priest, like his mind is being imposed, his memory patterns are being temporarily imposed on someone, but that priest is ordained and still has his soul,
right,
then the answer for some things might be different than others, like consecrating the Eucharist. Because if the priest still has his body and his own soul, and his memories have just been altered to Sam Beckett's, well, then he would be able to consecrate it because he's got the soul of an ordained priest.
Right.
But I checked, and today there's a wiki for everything. And there's a fandom wiki for Quantum Leap. And I looked at Dean Stockwell. Thank you, Darren. Yeah. Who played Al on the show. There's a fandom wiki for Quantum Leap, and I looked it up to find out how did the time travel work on that show. And it turns out Sam only looks like a different person to the people around him, but it's really him in his body.
Oh, I never got that.
Yeah,
okay.
So what happens is he displaces, except for their appearance, he displaces this other person. So he transubstantiates. The appearances remain the same, but the substance is different.
Oh, yes, he does.
And he's there with his own body, and the person he leapt into, known as a leapee, is transferred to a waiting room back at the project that he was in charge of. So you've got Sam under an illusion in the past, and you've got the person he leapt into back in the present in a waiting room. And actually sometimes they'll apparently interview the leapee to find out the information they need to tell Sam to help him.
Oh.
So really, they're two completely different people. And so it's really Sam Beckett who's in the past. And Sam Beckett, therefore, could not perform a sacrament that requires an ordained priest. Now, he could perform baptisms, because you don't have to be an ordained priest to baptize. And potentially, he could witness the sacrament of marriage, because you don't have to be a priest for that. In the particular case of him leaping into someone or displacing someone at the moment of "you may kiss the bride," at that point the sacrament's already been done. So the priest who was there to witness it would have been valid and licit, and Sam has just elbowed that priest off the stage at the last moment, but the sacrament's already there.
It's funny that in that episode they didn't actually have him celebrate any sacrament.
Yeah,
I wonder if there was a
the
Catholic.
Authors.
Yeah. Somebody knew what they were doing. That was very well done. That was from Anonymous. Anonymous, I'm with you too. I love Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin, and I like the word edutainment too. He's educational. and he's entertainment.
Thank you.
Yep. And again, I just want to thank Eric and Nato. Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you, Psychella.
Great doing with you again, and that'll be our regular music now, right? Oh, that's gonna be good. We'll see you. Whoa, we're done for the day, I guess. Yeah, we're okay. We'll see you next time. God
We're not
willing.
going to do a third hour?
Right? No, I guess not.
Okay.
Catholic Answers Live.